Hello, I'm Michael Topham, technical writer for digital photo, and welcome to this video lesson that's all about cleaning and cloning those annoying and frustrating distractions out of your images. If you're running through the main feature in order this month, you'll already know how to improve the composition of your images from watching Phil Hall's video. You will have also learned how to improve the contrast in your shots by watching John Adams's tutorial. Once you've tackled these two things, the next stage to fast-tracking a digital image is to take a close look around a photo to see if there are any distractions or imperfections that need to be removed. Chances are there will always be some cleaning and cloning that needs to be done in your images, even if it's just removing a few specks of dust or sensor dirt. It might not be the most exciting post-processing job in the world, but getting rid of those distractions is immensely satisfying, and it's well worth doing if you want to come away with a much cleaner, smarter looking image as a result. So let's take a look at the image we're going to be working with in this tutorial. Now I've already adjusted the composition, so the traction engine here on the right is neatly sitting on the third, and the contrast has been enhanced using levels. It's a really good idea that both of these stages have been done before we get to the stage of cleaning up the image, because we don't really want to waste time cleaning and cloning parts of an image that might actually be removed during the composition stage. In this shot, we've got a bit of sensor dirt that needs to be removed up here in the top areas of the sky. We've got a rather annoying shadow of a figure in the foreground that we can remove quite easily with the clone stamp tool, and we're going to get rid of that rather distracting telegraph pole and the wires that lead through the sky. So we're going to start by creating a duplicate layer to work on, and it's really good to do this as we'll have no chance of damaging our main background layer. Furthermore, if we do want to return to our original image at any time and start the cloning and healing process again, we could very simply just delete our duplicate layer. So I'm going to go up to Layer in the menu bar and then go down and click on Duplicate Layer, and I'm going to rename this duplicate layer Cleaning, and then I'm going to hit OK, and that new duplicate layer will arrive above the background layer. We're going to make a start by removing the easiest distractions in the image first, which are these small specks of sensor dirt. So I'm going to go across into the toolbox and pick out the Spot Healing Brush. This has to be one of my favourite healing tools to use. It automatically samples around the area we're healing and works out the best pixels to use. Unlike the healing brush, where you have to manually select the pixels you want to use by holding down the Alt key and clicking in the relevant area in the image. So moving into the options bar, we can see that my brush size is set to 50 pixels and I need to increase the size, so I'm going to hit the right square bracket key a couple of times and set it to a size of 80 pixels, and alongside the type I'm going to set it to proximity match. Now moving into the image, I can just run that spot healing brush over these distractions and it will remove them seamlessly. So take a good look in the image for any sensor dirt that needs to be removed or any very basic distractions. So I'm just going to remove a little bit of sensor dirt up here towards the top left as well, and there's just a few specks of dirt in the foreground I'm just going to remove using this tool. Now we can see that the spot healing brush has done a great job of removing that sensor dirt, but it won't be so good for removing this shadow down towards the bottom in the foreground. If we did use the spot healing brush in this area, you can see that we'll probably get some quite fuzzy effects, and that's not what we're looking for. So I'm going to take a step back by hitting Ctrl and Z, and I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. Moving into the toolbox and selecting the clone stamp tool, the clone stamp tool is used to sample pixels from one area and then place them in another. And it's really good to use where the pixel values are very similar. So it's going to be great to use here in the foreground. So moving up into the options bar, I need to increase the brush size, so I'm going to hit the right square bracket key and set it to 150 pixels, and then I'm also going to make sure that the brush is a little bit softer using the shortcut Shift and the left square bracket key. Taking a look at the mode in the options bar, that needs to be set to normal, and the opacity can be set to 100%, and check you've got a tick in the aligned box. So how are we going to remove this shadow out of the foreground? Well, I'm going to move into the image and I'm going to hold down the Alt key, which allows me to sample the pixels that I want to use for replacement. And I'm going to sample the pixels underneath the traction engine here. I'm just going to click once with my mouse, And then I'm just going to very carefully just start brushing away that shadow, and you can see that it's just starting to be removed. Now it's a good idea when you're cloning with the clone stamp tool to take lots of sample points, and that will avoid you repeating any patterns. So I'm going to hold down Alt again, take a new sample point, and then just start brushing away. So I'm just going to take lots of new sample points as I'm working, and that will avoid us repeating any patterns here in the foreground. So that's starting to be removed. That looks pretty good. Just going to run that over there, and that shadow has been completely removed. So now we've removed the sensor dirt and that shadow that was in the foreground, we can now turn our attention to the telegraph pole here in the center of the image and the wires that lead through the sky. So I'm going to zoom into the image using the shortcut Control and Plus, moving through the image with the hand tool up towards the top right. We're going to start removing these wires with the clone stamp tool again, taking sample points of the sky, but at the moment the brush size is a little bit big, so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a sample underneath the wires, and then I'm just going to start cloning them away. Remembering to take lots of sample points as you work for the best clone. So just starting to brush those away, that's looking pretty good and pretty seamless. When you do get to the edge of the steam, it's quite a good idea to take a new sample point just here, right next to the steam, or just above it, and that will allow you to get a really good blend. Now if you're not happy with your cloning, you can always change over to the healing brush tool and then run that over, and you'll get a really good blend. So I'm just going to work through the image, taking a bit of time to take my sample points. If you do make a mistake, just hit Control and Z, take a step back, and take a new sample point, and try again. So I'm just working through the image, very, very carefully. Take your time when you're cloning, and you'll get a much better effect. So here we go, we're just getting to another edge of the steam here. So I'm just going to take a sample point underneath this time, and just going to brush that away, and just brushing through the image, moving through with the hand tool, just removing these wires. So like I said, you can always switch over to the healing brush if you need to, by going into the toolbox and then picking out the healing brush, and then you can use the Alt key to specify the pixels you want to use, and then just brush over just to neaten up your clone. I think that's all looking rather good. I will just use the healing brush inside the steam area here, taking a sample of the white pixels, just brushing that through just to tidy up the cloning that I carried out with the clone stamp tool. So going back to the wires, I'm just going to work my way down to the telegraph pole with the clone stamp tool, taking lots of sample points, and that will ensure that I get a really good clone there. When you do get down towards the telegraph pole, you can then start thinking about cloning out the wires on the left hand side of this pole, and this is going to take me about a minute or so to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clone out these wires using the clone stamp tool, and I'll rejoin you in a minute. So now we're back with the image. We can see over here on the left that I've done quite a neat job of removing those telegraph wires using a combination of the clone stamp tool and the healing brush just to tidy up my cloning. So back with the telegraph pole, I'm going to zoom back in nice and close, and I'm going to use the clone stamp tool just to start removing this telegraph pole. So I'm going to take a sample just off to the right and just start removing this. Now we're going to start working down towards this brick building just below it, and then when you do get down towards the edge, just stop a little bit short, and that's where we're just going to change the brush that we're using. So moving down towards this shed area, I'm going to zoom into the image, as this is going to be quite a precise area of cloning, as we need to actually just kind of remove the telegraph pole and just replace it with this brickwork. So I need to change my brush that I'm using. So I'm going to make it a lot smaller, down to about 40 or 30 pixels. And I'm also going to make sure that we're using a hard brush. So I'm going to hit Shift and the right square bracket key. Sticking with the clone stamp tool, I think I will just make it a little bit smaller actually, down to around 15 pixels. Zoom in a little bit more. It's really good to zoom into your images when you're cloning in detailed areas. And I'm just going to start brushing away the telegraph pole, and just brushing my way down to the edge of the brick building. Take your time, zoom in a little bit more if you really want to, and I'm just going to work my way down to the edge with this hard brush, And I will just make my brush a little bit smaller again, I think. And it's very detailed cloning work, this, but it'll be well worth it in the long run. So I'm just going to clone down. Don't worry that you're removing those wires, because we can clone those back in. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Just remove that out of the way. So you've got a nice edge to that brick building, something a bit like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm take a sample point of this cable here, and I'm just going to clone that back in up towards the edge of the building. And likewise, I can do the same for this bit here. Let's just take a step back and just try that again. That's a bit better. Just work that up to the edge of the building. So moving down through the image, I'm just going to start thinking about how I'm going to remove this telegraph pole. And you can see here that this brick structure is actually going to be a quite difficult area to clone, because if we were to take the brickwork over here on the right and then clone it up against these bricks here, we're actually going to lose that circular shape of the brickwork. So what we can do is we can be quite clever, and we can take a selection of this area on the left. We're going to then paste that and flip it horizontally, and then we can actually clone around that new layer. So to do that, we're going to go across into the toolbox and pick out the lasso tool. Just go up into the options bar and check that you're selected on new selection and the feather is set to 0 pixels. Moving into the image, you just want to select the left hand side of this circular brickwork. So just going to run this through the image very, very carefully, and then I'm just going to join up the selection, and then when you can see the marching ants, you can go up to edit and then down to copy merged, and then you can go up to edit and down to paste, or you could of course hit the shortcut for paste, which is Ctrl+V. You'll now see that we've got layer number 1 in the layers palette, and we want to flip this layer. So I'm going to go to image, down to rotate, across, and then down to flip layer horizontal. You'll now want to move into the toolbox and pick out the move tool, because we want to position this layer in the image. So I'm going to take hold of it and just drag it across, and this is where we need to be quite careful, as we need to line it up, and you can hit Ctrl and T to enter free transform, and I'm just going to transform it into position. So something a bit like that. That looks pretty good to me. I'll hit enter to apply that, but I will just pick out the eraser tool, I think, and I'm just going to use the eraser with layer 1 selected just to erase inside that area there, just to tidy it up a little bit, and we can now concentrate on our cloning again. So it's very important that we go back into the layers palette and select our cleaning layer. We're still selected on the eraser tool at the moment, so I'm going to go back into the toolbox and select the clone stamp tool, move down through the image, and then I'm going to work up through this area. So I'm going to start, just increase my brush size a little bit, not too large, taking sample points and just working through this area. It will take a bit of time to do, but that's the fun in cloning. It's very, very satisfying when you get a really good realistic effect. Don't be afraid to zoom right in if you need to. I'm working here at 500%, so just take a sample point here and just start brushing that in. As you can see, we're starting to get a nice blend there. That's looking pretty good, I think. Do that a little bit further, and then we can start cloning this brickwork. Take lots of sample points and just slowly work up through the image, and you'll begin to see there that we can start brushing up against that layer 1, and we're not actually doing any harm to that brickwork whatsoever. So we're just looking quite good. Just remember to zoom out now and again just to check out your work. That's starting to look pretty seamless at 50%, so that's good. You can now zoom back into the image and just continue cloning this area. So it's probably going to take me, I don't know, in the region of a minute or two just to finish off this little area, and I'll rejoin you in a second. So here we are then. We can see that I've removed this last section of the telegraph pole. That took me about a minute or so to do. Now if we zoom out using Ctrl and minus, we can check out our cloning work, and we can see here at 200% that is looking really, really good. Let's zoom out to 100%. Yes, we would barely ever know that there was a telegraph pole there in shot, and if we move through the image up towards the sky, we can't see any traces at all of the wire. I can just see here there's a little area in the image where there's a little bit of a blemish, so I'm just going to go into the toolbox and just clean up where I need to with the healing brush tool, remembering just to take a sample and then just brush across the sky. I can now zoom out and check out my cloning and healing work using the shortcut Ctrl and 0. When you're happy with your final result, it's quite a good idea just to turn off your cleaning layer so then you can see the difference between before and after. I'm just going to make the image a little bit larger on screen. Let's just drag that out a bit and zoom in a little bit. So if I just go into the layers palette and turn off the cleaning and layer 1 that we've created there, we can see the original image. We've got a lot of those distractions, and we've removed them seamlessly using a combination of the spot healing brush, and clone stamp tool. Let's turn the layers back on now in the layers palette, and you can just see there are now no traces of those distractions whatsoever. All that's left to do now is save our final cloned image. So I'm going to go up to File and move down to Save As. Locate the area where you'd like to save the image, and then give it the new name Traction Engine Final.psd. And it's always a really good idea to save your images as a Photoshop file when you've got layers in the layers palette, so you can come back and return to them and make any further adjustments if you need to down the line. So just check you've got layers ticked there beside the save options, and I'm just going to save that file. Right, so now that we've carried out some basic cleaning up, make sure you check out the cleaning and cloning part 2 video on the CD, where we'll show you some more advanced cloning tips and advice. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one very shortly.